Amazing twist, Millionaire CEO's son surprises everyone by choosing the maid as his mother. Eric Thompson stood at the entrance of the lavish gala, his father's world of opulence swirling around him. Gold chandeliers bathed the room in warm light, illuminating the faces of the elite. But as he scanned the crowd, he felt like an alien in a familiar land. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the corporate bravado, it all felt hollow. What would it mean to cling to that glittering facade, knowing that true worth lay beyond their pretentious smiles? With every invitation to corporate internships arriving in droves, he felt his father's ambitions closing in, suffocating him beneath expectations he never signed up for. He turned and caught a glimpse of Maria, the family maid, dusting off the lemon-hued silk tablecloths. To the crowd, she was invisible, just another cog in their extravagant machine. For Eric, she had always been more, his confidant, his coach, and, in many ways, the heart of his childhood. In quiet moments, she'd teach him the lessons of hard work and authenticity, the stark contrast to the entitlement he saw in his peers. As the night progressed, whispers floated through the air, wrapping around him like chains. "Can you believe she's still working here?" He overheard a group of industry insiders laughing, their voices laced with disdain. Anger bubbled up within him. How could they mock the very person who nurtured him? The pain of their judgment collided with his desire for acceptance. How much longer could he let the world dictate who he should be? The reality of his privilege weighed heavily on him. He craved authenticity in a life where appearance was everything. Before they could dissolve into the crowd, he felt the urge to scream, to shake them awake. He'd brushed aside these emotions for years. Was it cowardice or a misguided loyalty? The pressures grew, a gnawing reminder of the upcoming graduation that loomed ahead. Each congratulatory email felt heavier than the last. They echoed with his father's ambitions, each moment shoving him further into a path he didn't want. He couldn't breathe. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The clock ticked, and he was spiraling. Eric's gaze returned to his father, who basked in the limelight, a king amidst the crowd. As admiration radiated off the guests, something within him snapped. In a surge of courage, he found himself striding toward the stage, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through his veins, fueling the escalating storm within. What was he doing? He could feel the doubts clawing at him, yet he pressed on. With the microphone gripped tightly, he silenced the crowd. Tonight, I want to acknowledge the person who truly deserves this moment of celebration, he declared, every word echoing off the walls. All eyes darted to Maria, uncertainty etched on their faces. The murmurs faded into disbelief, only he could hear the thundering pulse of his heart. Would he be celebrated for such an act of loyalty, or condemned for betraying their world of privilege? The question hung heavy in the air, amplifying the tension that had become a weight he'd carried far too long. Every glare felt like the end of his familiar life, hanging precariously before him. Would he dare to claim his true identity? The microphone felt heavy in Eric's trembling hand as he stood on that stage, the weight of the moment crashing upon him like a tidal wave. He deliberately locked eyes with Maria, the warmth of a hidden lifetime sparking between them, as if no one else existed in that cavernous room. The fear that seized his body deepened, but alongside it emerged a clarity he hadn't known he craved. Eric's declaration hung in the air, a challenge to the status quo. He could feel his father's glare piercing through the facade, a potent blend of anger and disbelief. The momentary silence that enveloped the room could have swallowed him whole, yet an unexpected sense of liberation blossomed within. Had he finally allowed himself to strip away the layers of expectation? Eric, his father's voice boomed, breaking the spell, what are you doing? This isn't the time or place. The indignation dripped from his words, leaving a bitter aftertaste in Eric's mouth. "Dad, it's precisely the time," he countered, a newfound conviction creeping into his voice. "I can't pretend anymore. I won tea." For an instant, he saw admiration flicker in the eyes of a few guests, but that flicker was quickly extinguished by the scornful gazes of others. Their judgment was palpable, a judgment he had felt his entire life. However, this time, instead of sinking under their disdain, Eric actively chose resistance. He straightened his posture and continued, his voice steady as he recalled the countless lessons Maria had imparted, lessons on dignity and courage. "Maria has been here for me more than anyone in this room. She has shaped who I am, far more than the titles or wealth that you all cherish. I refuse to uphold a facade that grows thinner with every hollow praise that is lavished upon me." A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd as murmurs rose again, louder this time, reflecting the mounting chaos within them. But instead of retreating, he felt emboldened. This was not merely a speech, it was a clarion call. As his gaze locked onto Maria's, he noticed her expression a mix of pride, disbelief, and something else entirely, hope. "Tonight isn't about extravagance, it's about recognizing those who truly matter. It's about our choices. I choose authenticity, and I choose Maria." Each word resonated in the atmosphere, grounding him in the reality he had always evaded, but as he stepped down from the stage, the exhilaration ebbed, replaced by the cold sting of possible repercussions. In that vulnerable moment, doubts flooded his mind. What had he unleashed? Would he be stripped of his place in his father's world? Would the respectability his family once held slip through their fingers because of him? Maria stepped closer, her eyes glistening, and for a heartbeat, nothing else mattered. "Eric, I'm so proud of you," she whispered, and in that simple acknowledgement, he found a fragment of his identity he had buried deep for far too long. His life's direction, suddenly more entangled than ever in a web of choices, hung before him like a misty horizon. Returning to the crowd marked by palpable tension, Eric faced his father, who seemed a stranger now. "This isn't over, son." The threat lingered in the air, and something deep in Eric sparked at the realization that he was now a player in this high-stakes game. As he navigated back into a world that felt both familiar and utterly foreign, he understood that claiming his identity was just the beginning. What other truths lay buried beneath a life of gilded expectations? The very journey to uncover them felt daunting. But even amid the uncertainty, a thought crystallized within him: it was time to explore who he truly was. What lay ahead would not be easy, but neither was living a lie. With determination brewing in his chest, the notion of confronting the rich tapestry of his past spurred him forward into the unknown. The time had come to face the truths concealed beneath the surface of privilege. And so, with a resolute heart, Eric prepared to delve deeper into the complexities of his identity. His next crucial step awaited him. Would he uncover the hidden depths of his potential or succumb to the same pressures that had suffocated him for so long? The days that followed Eric's declaration blurred together, a cocktail of anxiety and exhilaration. The air felt thicker, charged with unspoken words and unacknowledged tensions. Each morning, as he stared into the mirror, the man reflecting back seemed somehow different, a fusion of the cautious boy he had been and the emerging man daring to challenge the expectations that had bound him. His father's discontent loomed like a shadow. Eric could practically feel it seeping into the fabric of his life, wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. Yet, for the first time, alongside the fear of his father's wrath, there was a flickering light and insatiable curiosity about who he could be untethered from those expectations. He immersed himself in conversations with Maria, her insights a balm to his fraying nerves. "You're grappling with an identity that isn't yours, Eric. It's time to ask what truly fulfills you," she urged during their quiet moments together. Her words spun in his mind, echoing like a mantra, pushing him to confront buried truths. Could the lavish lifestyle he'd always known be a mere distraction from a deeper calling? As he returned to work, the already familiar corporate halls now felt like a labyrinth of judgment. Colleagues regarded him with a mix of pity and confusion, as if they sensed the seismic shift within him, even if they couldn't articulate it. Meetings became a daily exercise in balancing the image he'd cultivated against his burgeoning authenticity. In presenting new initiatives, he felt an ephemeral dissociation. He'd pitch ideas he no longer believed in, propelled by a fear of ridicule and a desire for acceptance, but unease began to bubble beneath the surface. One afternoon, an impromptu gathering turned into a revealing free-for-all. If he had grown accustomed to observing from the sidelines, this time he chose to jump in. "What do you think we're really doing here?" Eric questioned, his tone proving uncharacteristically assertive. The room quieted, eyes widened, caught off guard by his sudden candor. The head of the project responded first, cautiously, "We're driving results, Eric, fostering growth. Isn't that our aim?" "There's more to it than that," he pressed, feeling the fire of resolve rekindle. "We can innovate and lead without compromising our values. We owe it to ourselves to create something worthwhile." A moment of unanticipated silence followed, curiosity flickering in some faces, skepticism in others. But in that instance, he recognized a potent truth: the conflict between who he had been and who he wanted to be didn't have to manifest as shame. Instead, it could be a catalyst for change. With renewed determination, Eric resolved to establish a separate initiative outside the confines of corporate expectations, a program dedicated to mentoring youth struggling with similar pressures he had faced growing up. It felt right, aligning with his burgeoning self-image. It was a validation of the choices he was beginning to own, yet, even as he crafted plans and reached out, a flicker of dread remained. He couldn't shake the feeling that his father-South's impending confrontation was close at hand. He felt both propelled by new ambitions and paralyzed by the reality of existing familial ties that threatened to fracture. What would his father think when the truth of his initiative surfaced? Amidst the excitement of connecting with potential men's and wanting to create change, darkness seeped in the looming inevitability of what was to come at the dinner table, the stark conversation that awaited. Eric knew in his heart that the problematic dance with his father had only just begun. Deep down, he sensed a confrontation that would test him in ways he couldn't yet fathom. Would he be brave enough to defend his choices, to stand firm against the gravity of his past life? The dinner invitation came sooner than expected, a simple email sealed with a manipulative cordiality that sent a shiver down his spine. Eric felt his heart race, a thrilling clash of anticipation and fear. This was it. The moment of truth loomed closer than he had ever imagined. What awaited him as the sun dipped below the horizon? Would confrontation yield clarity, or a confrontation of choices long repressed? The day of the dinner arrived, shrouded in an eerie blend of anticipation and dread. As Eric dressed, each layer of fabric felt like an added weight, a reminder of the expectations that would soon confront him. His fingers brushed over the collar of his shirt, an unyielding symbol of a life meticulously curated by his father. The mirror reflected a man caught between burgeoning resolve and the heavy tether of unspoken familial obligation. Stepping out of his apartment, he breathed deeply, embracing the cool evening air. This was no longer just a simple dinner, it was a stage set for a confrontation that threatened to dismantle the foundations of everything he had ever known. Thoughts swirled about how he would introduce the initiative, the one designed to reinforce the very ideals he was beginning to cherish. The drive to his father's estate felt interminable, each beat of his heart echoing a mantra of courage. Arriving, he felt the familiar sense of dread wash over him. The grandeur of the home felt oppressive, its walls adorned with trophies and accolades that bore witness to his father's relentless ambition. As he entered the dining room, the atmosphere was charged. His mother's gentle smile offered a brief sanctuary, but as he caught his father's eye, the truth weighed heavy. The room was cloaked in unspoken scrutiny. "Eric," his father began, setting the tone for the evening, "you look well. I trust work has been treating you kindly?" "Better than ever," Eric replied, forcing a smile, the tension unwavering as he took his seat. He sensed the unyielding gaze of his father bore into him, searching for cracks in the polished facade. Conversations flowed, touching upon mundane topics, a momentary distraction from the impending storm. However, Eric's mind raced. He could feel the conversation drifting, circling like a hawk ready to swoop down. The time had come to broach the subject of his initiative. With every small talk that flitted about, he became increasingly aware that this was his moment to define who he really was. "Dad," he broke in, his voice firmer than he anticipated. "There's something I need to talk to you about." The room stilled, eyes darting between him and his father, anticipation crackling in the air. "I've decided to start a mentorship program for youth who struggle under the pressures we once faced as a family. I want to help them find their own voice." Silence thickened, a palpable tension gripping everyone present. His father's expression morphed, confusion, irritation, and disbelief collided in a singular moment. "That's noble, Eric, but is this really necessary? What do you know about hardship? The world of the common people?" His words dripped with condescension, designed to belittle. Eric felt the heat of indignation rise within him. "I know enough," he retorted. "I've seen firsthand what these pressures can do. I want to offer them the guidance I didn't have. It matters to me." His father's anger flared. "And what you want doesn't matter. Not if it jeopardizes our name and legacy." The air crackled with unmasked disapproval. Eric's heart raced, his earlier determination teetering on the brink of collapse. His father's words struck like arrows, designed to wound, to re-establish control over a son he no longer understood, yet buried beneath that shock was a seed of strength. "I refuse to define myself by your expectations any longer," Eric declared. The words spilled out, unfiltered and raw, a declaration of independence he hadn't fully realized he needed to voice. As silence enveloped the table, he sensed the shift within himself, a newfound clarity amidst chaos, yet, even as he stood firm, uncertainty gnawed at him. Could he truly carve out a new identity while confronting the specter of his father's wrath? He caught his mother's supportive glance but quickly turned back to his father, prepared for the inevitable war of wills that awaited. This wasn't merely about a dinner conversation, it was a battle for self-acceptance against the backdrop of familial loyalty. As the tension thickened, Eric braced for the impending confrontation that could either shatter their dynamic or catalyze his transformation. Would he be able to hold his ground, or would he be swallowed whole by the expectations that had dominated his life? The decisive moment was at hand, and behind every calculated word exchanged, Eric sensed not just a clash of ideals but the opportunity for liberation, a chance to redefine his own legacy amid the ruins of expectations set long before his birth. Would he finally embrace the complexities of his identity, or would he risk perpetuating the cycle of discontent bred by his father's expectations? The answer loomed just beyond the horizon of the dinner table, waiting to unfurl its consequences. What awaited Eric on this perilous journey of self-discovery? Eric's heart pounded in his chest, a rapid staccato echoing through his mind. The words he had uttered hung in the air like a thick fog, obscuring the view of what lay beyond. His father's reaction had been swift, a visceral response designed to intimidate. Yet there was something liberating in having spoken them. A spark ignited within, daring him to see how far he could push against the boundaries set by his upbringing. "Do you truly believe you're equipped to help anyone?" his father exclaimed, no longer concealing the disdain that seeped through every syllable. "You've lived your entire life sheltered from reality. This is a frivolous pursuit, one that undermines everything I've built." A tremor of doubt rippled through Eric, piercing the veil of resolve he had constructed. Yet, it was quickly replaced by an even deeper conviction. Maybe he didn't have the scars of hardship etched into his own life, but he had seen the impact of isolation, felt the chasm of silence created by unfulfilled dreams. Standing at that dining table, it was time to dissect the narrative that had been carved out for him by his father's expectations, the mirage of success that had masked a detachment from reality. "I understand more than you think," Eric replied, his voice steadying, defying the quake within. "Perhaps the reason I feel compelled to do this is because I've lived my life in a gilded cage. I've watched countless people struggle, people like our former housekeeper's daughter, whose potential was stifled. It matters to me because it reflects what I'm trying to escape." The silence that followed felt like an electric charge, crackling with tension. His mother, usually the mediator, merely looked on, her gaze flickering between her husband and son, silently weighing her allegiances. Enough. Eric's father slammed his hand on the table, rattling the fine china and momentarily breaking the tense atmosphere. I've sacrificed everything for this family, for our name. If you think venturing into this mentorship nonsense will do anything but tarnish that, you're sorely mistaken. The words hit Eric like a slap. It was not just an attack on his initiative, it was an assault on his very identity. The walls of his childhood home, once symbols of comfort, now felt like a prison, imprisoning his ambition and dignity within gilded bars. Maybe you're right, he said slowly, deliberately, feeling a sense of agency as he chose to relinquish the fear that he had cradled for so long. Maybe I haven't known true hardship, but it doesn't discount the value of what I want to achieve. I'm not aiming to disrupt our legacy, I want to build a new one that reflects kindness and support. His father's expression shifted subtly, no longer adverse but contemplative, as if letting the words wash over him rather than repel them. This surprised Eric. He had expected a defensive rebuttal, yet there was a flicker of something else, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of his growing independence. Words don't change reality, Eric, his father said, his tone now more measured, almost weary. You think you can change the world? You think a few hours spent with troubled kids will matter in the long run? And I will find out, one ti. Eric shot back, emboldened. Isn't that the point of discovering oneself, Dad? Isn't it worth the risk? In that moment, Eric felt a shift, not only in his father's composure but within himself. He was crafting his own narrative, weaving a story of intention rather than obligation. In a world that often celebrated conformity, he was grasping the threads of his existence, shedding the imposed identity like a snake casting off its skin. However, a new thread of anxiety sneaked into his thoughts. Would his father ever accept this shift? Would he be able to escape the shadow of that legacy, or would it always loom, a specter of his doubts? This was a deeper conflict, one only beginning to unfurl. As the evening progressed, an uneasy truce settled between father and son. Eric ventured to share more about his program, weaving his vision for a brighter future for youth. Battling the pressures that he himself had experienced in varying degrees. But in the recesses of his mind, Eric couldn't help but wonder, was his father merely biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again? Lost in these thoughts, he barely registered his mother's gentle interjection. Eric, have you thought about how you'll attract the right audience? You need a plan, she suggested, concern painting her expression. I'll figure that out. If I don't, I risk losing myself, he responded, determination seeping through the edges of uncertainty already gnawing at him. The challenge was just beginning. But as he stared across the table, the surface mirrored the ambitions that now felt less like a burden and more like a mission, one that he was compelled to pursue. What awaited him in the coming days would test every fiber of his being. Would he have the strength to keep navigating this path or risk losing everything? And somewhere, in the corners of that luxurious estate, a flicker of rebellion sparked a whisper of possibility. Now the question loomed larger than ever: what would he be willing to sacrifice to realize his vision? The answer to that dilemma would define not only his future endeavors but also the man he would ultimately become. The days that followed the confrontation were both exhilarating and paralyzing for Eric. He found himself oscillating between newfound determination and a haunting fear of inadequacy. With every hour spent poring over mentorship strategies and potential workshops for youth, echoes of his father's disbelief reverberated in the back of his mind. The freedom he had felt in that moment of defiance was quickly met with the weight of expectations, his own, and those layered upon him by his family. Eric began to outline his program, establishing a clear vision of what he wanted to achieve. Yet drafting the mission statement proved more challenging than he expected. Each sentence felt like a line in the sand, dividing the man he had been molded to be from the one he was becoming. In the comfort of his well-appointed office, designed to inspire creativity but often stifling his spirit, he set to work. He envisioned a space where young people could articulate their struggles and dreams, a safe haven where anxiety didn't stifle ambition. As he sketched out ideas for workshops centered on emotional intelligence and resilience, a flicker of excitement ignited a spark in his chest, momentarily silencing the doubts whispering at the fringes of his focus. However, reality dashed his optimism quickly. He faced the first hurdle: how to attract the right audience. His speech to his mother echoed ominously in his mind. What specific strategies would draw in troubled youth? Social media campaigns seemed shallow, too targeted. One morning, as Eric scrolled through forums discussing youth empowerment, he stumbled upon a story about a young girl from his neighborhood who, with just a bit of guidance and encouragement, transformed her life. The words resonated within him. His hands trembled slightly as he typed an inquiry to the author of the post. How had she reached this girl? What methods did she employ? Days passed, and the response came: a simple email filled with eloquent, actionable advice. Much of it revolved around storytelling, authenticity, and connection. The realization hit Eric with the force of a revelation. If he were to draw youth to him, he needed to appeal to their realities, not just the polished narrative he had previously envisioned. He had to expose himself as vulnerable, honest about his own journey, and willing to cultivate relationships built on trust. Eager to implement this new strategy, he decided to volunteer at a local community center that served disadvantaged youth. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Would he be able to connect with those whose lives had been different from his own? Would they see past the layers of privilege that had shielded him his entire life? On his first day, Eric walked through the community center's doors, feeling like an outsider peering in at a world he desperately wanted to be a part of. The noise, a lively mix of laughter, shouting, and the sound of sneakers squeaking on the polished floors, was both alive and chaotic. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach, the echoes of his father's disapproval thrumming just below the surface. As he introduced himself to the group, he stumbled over his words, grappling for an authentic way to present himself. Anxiety gripped him, rendering his voice unsteady. Yet, the more he spoke of his intentions to uplift and connect, the more he began to see the glimmers of potential within each young face present. The learning curve was steep, and as the weeks progressed, Eric faced several uncomfortable truths. He witnessed defiance, skepticism, and raw pain reflecting in the eyes of the children he sought to inspire. These were not just statistics but individuals with unique histories, struggles, and dreams. Each child was a puzzle, and he was determined to put his pieces together with patience and integrity. But what started as a mission to uplift shifted into a quest for understanding. In some ways, they taught him as much as he hoped to teach them. His privilege became a double-edged sword. It often alienated him yet provided him insights he previously took for granted. One encounter woke him up entirely. A boy named Marcus, skeptical of Eric's intentions, confronted him bluntly. What do you know about struggle? You've never had to fight for anything. That question echoed long after their session ended. Did he truly understand what it meant to fight tooth and nail against adversity? Had he ever really grappled with failure? That night, Eric sat alone in his office, a mix of frustration and existential reckoning forming a storm in his mind. He began crafting a list not of goals, but of his vulnerabilities, insecurities, and the small moments where he had felt defeated in his life. As he penned each thought down, the act began to feel like shedding layers of himself. Would confessing his own struggles create a truer connection with the youth he was trying to mentor? With the looming question of authenticity pressing on his conscience, Eric made a bold decision. The next session, he would share something personal, his own insecurities about stepping outside his father's shadow and why he felt so called to pursue mentorship in the first place. Little did he know, this moment would become pivotal not only for him but for the young lives he aspired to impact. Yet, laying himself bare would entail exposing his deepest fears, leaving him vulnerable, an unsettling thought that gripped him tightly as he prepared for a confrontation with his very self. As he looked at the list of vulnerabilities, a thought surfaced. The real challenge lay ahead. Could he dismantle the identity forged by his father's expectations to become a catalyst for change? The next day, as Eric stepped into the community center once again, the air felt heavy with anticipation and uncertainty. Would they accept his truth, or was he destined to remain an outsider forever? As Eric entered the community center, he scanned the vibrant room filled with youth bouncing between conversations and activities, each animated and raw in their expression. Today, the stakes felt different. He was preparing to pull back the curtains of his own life, revealing a truth he had kept hidden for so long. He found a small circle of kids gathered around a table, deep in discussion about their aspirations. Normally, he would jump in with motivational blurbs crafted from polished speeches, but today was about something deeper. He took a breath, steeling himself against the doubt nipping at his heels. "Hey everyone," he started, his voice betraying a slight tremor. Silence fell upon the group, and all eyes turned to him, a mix of curiosity and skepticism glinting in their expressions. "I wanted to talk about something personal today," he continued, words pouring forth awkwardly, propelled by a combination of hope and fear. "I've always lived in this bubble where success was expected. My father he's a big deal, you know? And because of that, there's this pressure to be perfect, to live up to a legacy that's not even mine." The children exchanged glances, some leaned in closer, intrigued. He continued, opening the floodgates of his vulnerability. "I've struggled with feelings of inadequacy. I've felt like I was never good enough, even when I had every advantage on my side. You're right, Marcus, I don't know what it's like to struggle in the same way you do. But I'm here, trying to understand, trying to make a difference, maybe because I wish someone had cared enough to help me when I stumbled." A heavy pause followed his words as he let the reality of his confession speak for itself. He could see the glimmers of recognition spark in some of their eyes. Maybe they understood the hidden battles behind his privilege. "Today, I want to do things differently, ask you all to reflect on your own struggles and what you hope for. What if we could navigate our stories together?" He was met with apprehensive silence, but he pressed on. "I'm not here to lecture. I want to learn from you, too." After a moment, a girl named Mia, tentative yet brave, raised her hand. "What if we don't know how to express it? What if we think nobody cares?" Her voice trembled, revealing layers of frustration and hurt. Eric felt a pang in his chest. Her words struck a chord deep within. "That's okay. Maybe we can start by sharing one small thing. We all have a voice, and it matters." The group exchanged uncertain glances, but he could see the wheels turning in their minds, even if they did not yet feel ready to share. As the session progressed, Eric realized that by revealing his vulnerabilities, he had inadvertently created a space for theirs. The room transformed from a collection of guarded individuals into a collective journey, every shared story adding another thread to the tapestry of understanding they were weaving together. Days turned into weeks, and with each new session, Eric felt a metamorphosis within himself. He embraced the discomfort of uncertainty, each encounter forging a new part of him, one that craved authenticity even more. As he crafted a workshop based on shared narratives, a confidence sprang from within, blending knowledge with empathy. Yet, with this evolving purpose emerged a new challenge that set his mind reeling. He began to notice a divide emerging as certain individuals twisted his invitation to share into weapons of derision, mocking each other's stories instead of uplifting them. Eric felt a sharp pang of frustration. How could this happen when he had worked so hard to build trust? Was he truly prepared for the unpredictable nature of vulnerability? During a particularly charged session, a boy named Jamal snapped, "You don't know what it means to rise from the ashes. You're just playing pretend. This is real for us." The accusation hung heavy in the air, and Eric stood momentarily stunned, bracing himself against the swell of conflict. What had begun as an endeavor for connection suddenly spiraled into a battlefield of words. The fragility of their trust now seemed threatened. He realized he had to address the unaddressed, to confront the growing tension amongst them, or risk pulling apart the bonds they had so painstakingly forged. As he stood at the precipice of confrontation, a deeper truth began to unfurl inside him. It was not just about sharing vulnerability, it was about embracing the chaos that emerged from it. But the critical question remained: was he prepared to face the storm brewing before him to salvage their connection? The moment of truth approached. Would he risk everything he had built to confront the crux of distrust that had formed, or would he retreat to the safety of silence, shielding his own heart in the process? Eric's heart raced as he felt the collective gaze of the group fall upon him, frustration simmering just under the surface. Jamal's words echoed in his mind, a reminder of the raw honesty he'd hoped to inspire. But in that moment, division loomed like a dark cloud overhead, threatening to engulf the fragile tapestry they had begun to weave together. He inhaled deeply, grounding himself. It was time to confront the elephant in the room, the palpable resentment that had poisoned the air. "Jamal," he started, choosing his words carefully, "I get where you're coming from. I don't have the same struggles you guys do. But I'm here to listen and learn, not to pretend I know your pain." The room remained tense, and he could feel the walls he had hoped to break down reinstating themselves. What if we used this moment? What if instead of turning on each other, we channeled that anger into something powerful? We could help each other instead. Mia shifted in her seat, her eyes bright with possibility. But how do we even start? There's a lot of hurt and anger. It feels overwhelming. Her vulnerability risked carrying the weight of the discussion into dangerous territory, and Eric felt it acutely. He recognized the need for a different approach. "Let's do a group exercise," he suggested, his voice steadying as he formulated a plan. "I want each of you to jot down what you feel in a word or phrase. Don't hold back, just let it flow. Then we can create a battle board, something visual that we can all see. We'll take those feelings and turn them into a positive declaration together." For a moment, silence reigned, contemplation replacing tension. Then gradually, the scattered murmurs of agreement began to sound. Even Jamal sat with a skeptical expression, but Eric noticed a flicker of intrigue in his eyes. As they worked through the exercise, Eric felt a glimmer of optimism. The atmosphere shifted, fueled by the mixture of honest sentiments being laid bare. Each word scrawled on the board: pain, betrayal, hope, resilience. Each was a stepping stone into deeper understanding. It became evident that while they may wield their struggles as shields, they could also forge them into tools for connection. For Eric, this transformation was like catching a glimpse of his own reflection. Every raw emotion shared peeled back a layer of his own defenses. He began to recognize that they were all on a parallel path of growth, even if their destinations were different. The insecurities he battled now mirrored the vulnerability his new friends displayed. At the end of the session, as the board filled with the tangled web of emotions, Jamal moved closer to Eric, visibly softened. "I guess it's not just you who has everything figured out. Maybe we're all just trying to sort through it all." Eric nodded, relief flooding over him. "Exactly. And it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to be messy." As he prepared to close out the session, Eric's resolve crystallized. He was learning that vulnerability was not merely an invitation to be heard, it was a call to courage that invited others to step forward, even amid chaos. But as their connections deepened, a new concern nagged at the edges of his mind. Would the fragile trust they had built be enough to withstand the impending challenges? Eric knew they were teetering on the precipice of something much bigger than mere storytelling. As he dismissed the group, a decision loomed larger than before: how to facilitate the next session. He felt compelled to trap the growing energy, but a nagging sense of urgency loomed larger. What if the wounds of the past haunted them and clashed with their newfound journey toward understanding? In that decisive moment, he braced himself for the next step. The time had come to test the strength of their resolve. Would they rise from this pivotal moment or retreat back into the safety of silence? The real challenge lay ahead, deeper and more personal than anything he had faced before. Eric's thoughts spiraled even as he dismissed the group. He knew he had struck a chord, but didn't he truly grasp how deep the fissures went? Each of them carried a burden, a weight that could easily tip them back into silence if he misstepped. The workshop room started to feel stifling, the remnants of their emotional catharsis hanging thick in the air. He needed to delve deeper, yet the specter of confrontation loomed ominously. In the days that followed, he found himself analyzing every word spoken during the session. Each emotion shared resonated within, forming echoes of his own unresolved struggles. The innate discomfort nudged him to confront his own vulnerabilities. Why was he so afraid of digging deeper? What lay behind the veil of his polished exterior? Each question felt like a step toward a revelation he was both eager and terrified to unearth. Determined, he grabbed a notebook and sat in a park, the calming sounds of nature competing with the storm inside him. He began to write, noting his thoughts clearly, capturing not just the sentiments he heard from the group, but also those he had long suppressed. What does pain feel like? He scribbled, and with it came a flood of memories, experiences he had lulled into the background. Eric's fingers hesitated over the next line. What are my own struggles? A wave of fear washed over him. Could he expose his own insecurities? The image he crafted for the world, a successful facilitator, a leader, began to crack. It was a daunting realization, but within it lay the heart of authenticity. Maybe sharing his own story could inspire others. But doing so required confronting the trepidation he constantly felt. The next session approached rapidly, and Eric felt the pressure. A raw honesty was necessary, but could he truly show his own vulnerabilities alongside those of his group? Should he risk becoming an equal participant rather than remain a guiding figure? The challenge was daunting, a personal crossroads demanding courage. Veering away from a structured plan, Eric entered the room with an open heart. Today, I want us to share not just what we've written on the battle board, but our personal stories behind those words, what they mean to us. A murmur of apprehension swept through the group. Mia was visibly distressed, Jamal's expression remained blank, uncertainty etched in his brow. They were hesitant, gripped by fear of exposure. Eric sensed the tension pulsating in the atmosphere and felt the walls of their collective defense rise once again. He took a slow breath, grounding himself in the moment, then boldly bore his own truth. I once felt unbearable fear of inadequacy, Eric began, his voice steady despite the tremor within. I still struggle with not feeling enough, comparing my achievements with others to the point of paralysis. The silence that followed felt heavy. Eric's admission unfurled threads of vulnerability among them, breaking the invisible dam holding back deeper expressions. One by one, the group began to trickle in their stories. Mia spoke of feeling unseen, Jamal shared about the expectations choking him, and others followed suit, revealing their hidden battles. As they delved into their discussions, Eric noticed a subtle shift not only in the atmosphere but within himself. The act of sharing felt transformative, a collective unearthing of truths that connected their individual struggles. His heart began to swell with anticipation as he witnessed the catharsis unfold before his eyes. This journey of vulnerability was not just about weathering storms but realizing that each revelation could form the bedrock of their connections. They were not merely a collection of broken pieces, they were a mosaic of resilience and tenacity. Yet as the clock ticked down, the reality hit him anew. Their once disparate narratives were converging, but what lay beyond their shared stories? Could they cultivate a deeper understanding without allowing the weight of their histories to drag them under? With an exhilarated heart, Eric prepared to steer the conversation into uncharted territories. The next step had to usher in resolutions, but he was unaware of the hidden adversaries that might rise within their newfound dynamic. What challenges awaited as they stepped deeper into their intertwining journeys? Would they falter or find strength in the darkness? The future hung in the balance, and Eric steeled himself for the revelations to come. Weeks turned into months, and Eric navigated the often turbulent waters of mentorship, transforming his uncertainty into purpose. The community center had sprouted into a space pure with potential, a sanctuary for young people who sought solace from the weight of their lives. Each session became a journey, punctuated by stories that unraveled struggles and ignited a newfound sense of purpose among the participants. Eric had come to learn that mentoring did not merely consist of imparting wisdom, it was about embracing vulnerability, both his own and the youth around him. He was no longer just a facilitator, he was a participant in their stories, engaging deeply with their truths. What began as an initiative to inspire had evolved into a community of shared experience and mutual understanding. With time, Eric felt a shift within himself. The introspection he'd long feared transformed into strength. He had confronted the crippling fears that had shadowed him since he first declared his initiative to the community. Who am I to help? He had often wondered. His breakthrough moment arrived unexpectedly one evening, during a particularly heartfelt session. The group collectively examined the themes of resilience, hope, and support. As conversations weaved between laughter and tears, Jamal, who had once expressed doubts about Eric's role, stood up. "You're not just our mentor anymore, you're family," he said, the weight of his words tinging the air with gravity. Nods and murmurs of agreement echoed throughout the room, confirming the bonds forged through vulnerability. That moment was a crucible, solidifying Eric's newfound identity. He was not merely defined by his father's legacy, or the expectations of wealth and privilege. He was defined by courage, the courage to claim his identity, to acknowledge his own vulnerabilities, and to foster a space for others to do the same. The applause that followed felt like a resounding affirmation, not just of his journey, but of the collective healing they had embarked on together. In the days that followed, he felt buoyed by an inconceivable lightness. No longer constricted by self-imposed limitations or the chokehold of his father's expectations, Eric began envisioning the future of his program. He dreamt of expanding it, workshops that connected mentoring with skills training, personal development initiatives, and a network that could unify outreach efforts across several communities. The blueprint unfolded before him with unwavering clarity. Perhaps for the first time in his life, however, lingering challenges awaited him back home. Confrontations with his father loomed closer, now inevitable following his initiative's burgeoning success. Eric understood the stakes had risen. This was not merely about forging a career but about defending the principles that now anchored his identity. As he prepared for the inevitable clash, he reminded himself of the empowering undercurrent supporting him, the community of youth thriving under his guidance, people who believed in his vision. Room after room of laughter, tears, and support became his source of courage. When he finally faced his father, standing tall in the lavish dining room contrasted starkly against the sterile expectations once forced upon him, he felt the weighty history of his upbringing settle over him like a heavy cloak. Yet with renewed wisdom, he did not waver. Eric stood firm. He had achieved more than personal growth, he had manifested a vision rooted in authenticity and purpose. "Father, I want to talk about my initiative," he began, his voice unwavering. The hesitation that had once accompanied such conversations was gone. "I've seen the impact it has had, not only in our community but within myself. I need you to understand that this is about my life and where I feel called to make a difference, and I want to apologize for that." His father's initial disbelief morphed into an icy silence, and for a fleeting moment Eric felt the terrain shift beneath him. Yet, he knew he had forged an undeniable path grounded in integrity. The tension thickened, but as he pressed on, he saw something slightly different flicker in his father's eyes, a mixture of confusion and, perhaps, an inkling of respect for the man Eric had become. "Your choice reflects the person you wish to become," his father finally acknowledged, an empire of expectations cracking ever so slightly. "But you must know there are risks to this path you've carved out. Not everyone will see your intentions as you see them." "I understand," Eric replied, feeling an undeserved confidence swell within him. "But I am willing to shoulder those risks. These aren't merely choices, they're declarations of who I am now." As he departed from the dinner, Eric felt an overwhelming clarity wash over him. He had crossed a threshold. Not only did he reclaim his identity, but he had also built bridges to a future defined by his choices rather than those dictated by others. This was triumph, a culmination of struggles transformed into certainty. Going forward, Eric's path shimmered with possibility. The mentorship program flourished, touching countless lives. He became a mentor not by inheritance, but by intention, and in those small victories, he found profound fulfillment. This journey of self-discovery and the courage to proclaim who he was culminated in a vision shimmering with authenticity and purpose. In this space, Eric finally felt at home. Each challenge, each confrontation, had polished his resolve, granting him an unshakable confidence that extended beyond his past. As he looked out into the horizon, he felt grounded, achieving not just individual transformation, but genuine connection with those whose voices needed support most. In declaring his values, Eric Thompson had not only chosen a different path, he had become a beacon of possibility for others navigating their own tumultuous journeys. Now, take a moment and reflect on your own journey. You need to subscribe now to follow more incredible stories of personal transformation like Eric's. Leave a like now to help our community grow. Your support makes a difference. Comment your thoughts on this inspiring conclusion and share your theories about what Eric will do next. And don't wait even one more second to share this inspiring video with at least 5 friends who need to hear how courage can redefine lives. This is the moment to show your support.